Lord, why me? Why is it that I'm dealing with the things I'm dealing with, rather than asking the Lord, what is it in this situation that you have for me? What is it that you're trying to teach me? How is it that you're trying to mature me? How are you trying to remake me? Maybe the Lord is molding and shaping and remaking something powerfully in your life. And if we're not careful, we'll miss the power and the beauty of what God is doing because we're so focused on our situation. Am I right about that, family?
Yes.
So I've got 3 life lessons I just want to share with you about as we focus our attention on the faithfulness of God, the God of the promise. And I found myself turning to Hebrews, the verses that we've been reading there. With the first piece of this coming from verse 22, when he says, let me go to the Amplified for you since we've seen it in the King James. And he says, let us all come forward and draw near. I'm in the Amplified, you'll see the King James. Let us all come forward and draw near with true, honest, and sincere hearts, in unqualified assurance and absolute conviction, engendered by faith. That is, by that leaning of the entire human personality on God, and in absolute trust and confidence in his power, wisdom, and goodness, having our hearts sprinkled and purified from a guilty conscience, and with our bodies cleansed with pure water. If you're jotting down your life lessons today, the first one is this: we have access to and assurance in his presence and personality as we face life's trials. We have access to and assurance in his presence and personality as we face life's trials. And somebody in the house just got an answer to prayer because they have been getting on the pastor saying, Pastor, you go too fast on those others. Yeah. For preaching. Can you slow that down and repeat that 2 or 3 times for me so that I can jot that down while we're going? Think of this. Somebody ought to be praising God a little bit in the house for some technology. The preaching might not get no better, but the technology is going to get better. We thank God for it. Yeah. There's something about going through trials and tribulations that really brings it home to me and to the family, to us as a family, about the need for experiencing the presence of God. And as I said, opening into this piece, it's really interesting to study the human behavior. We tend to be a little bit more observant about other folks' behavior than our own. But if you're a student of your own behavior and reflected back on some of the things that you have gone through, those trials you've gone through that maybe you didn't tell anybody about. That time when it felt like you were struggling out there in whatever area of sinfulness that was creeping into your life. Maybe when you were dealing with a stronghold that had hold of you and was simply trying to pull you away from the fellowship and feeling God's grace and mercy and joy operating in your life. Maybe it was something as simple as feeling your finances going astray on you and wondering, how am I going to pay that bill that's coming up, that I know is coming up. Matter of fact, I've got 2 of them already on my table, and the 3rd and 4th are coming up, and my check hasn't gotten any larger. And I'm trying to figure out how can I pay this situation. Maybe it's a health component. And it feels like I'm feeling helpless and hopeless because my health is now cascading downward and I don't know what to do. But you find yourself with whatever your unique trial and tribulation might be, your unique situation. And in those moments, the human tendency is to try to muscle up enough strength. Oh, I'm driving into somebody's neighborhood now. The tendency is to try to muscle up enough human strength to be able to wrestle down your problem. To be able to somehow tamp down and hold down your problem so that it doesn't override you. And if we're not careful, we'll put so much focus on our intellect, our emotion, our will, our physical, emotional makeup, that we begin to lose sight of the God who created us. And in losing sight of him and how Christ what Christ has sacrificed for us, we will tend to lose the joy that God has placed in us. It's still there. It tends to get masked over by all the stuff that we allow the world to come into our lives. And so we're focused on the periphery of life rather than on the real meaning of life. And so as I'm dealing with my trial, the question is, who can handle my trial?
Preach, God. Come on, Red.
If I try to handle my trial, I come up short. Am I by myself? I can wrestle a while. I may get a small victory every now and then. But the reality is there's not enough strength in me to handle all of my human trials. Would love to be able to think I did have it. But it's not in our humanity. But in those moments when we find ourselves dealing with those things that bring us to the point where we come to a recognition and an understanding that it's really not about us, that it's really about God, in those moments when it feels like that the waters of life are overrolling or are flowing over top of us and threatening to drown us, in those moments when it feels like that the mud under the ground underneath of our feet is turning into quicksand and it really doesn't feel solid, somebody in the house knows I need to turn to Jesus in that moment in time. I need to get up off of my horse and get on down where Jesus is operating and get him in the mix of this thing. And so the text tells me that we need to draw near to God.
Yes.
Those that believe in him must believe first that he is, Hebrews would say in another text, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. We need to get close to the isness of God. We need to understand who he is. This all-powerful, all-knowing, all-present God who's all righteous, all just, all merciful, all loving, this God who somehow tends to love me unconditionally, somehow just has a way of blessing into my life when I'm out there struggling. I'll talk to somebody. When I'm out there struggling in my sin, somehow made a pathway back through Jesus Christ, gave his only begotten Son, that I might have access back to him and have family relationship with him. And now as I'm walking in this life's journey, the reality is, who am I in this journey? If I've got Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, text tells me I'm a new creature in Christ Jesus.
Yes.
So if and certainly it is true, that is operating in your life, then why do we tend to try to reach back and grab the old baggage? Man, I just knocked on somebody's door. Why is it that when the difficulties come, can I preach this like I mean it? that we tend to some of us might run to the Lord first, and then if you don't answer quick enough, then we'll reach back and grab the baggage and try to haul it ourselves. When the Lord is saying, this is drawing near time. This is, we want to draw near all the time, but this is when you intimately, personally, humbly, almost helplessly but hopefully draw near to God. And it's the first component of experiencing the reality of God's faithfulness operating in your life. How does his promise, how does the God of promise fulfill his promise in the life of the believer unless you know the God of promise? So he invites us, he commands us, he inspires us to draw near. I like that. Come forward, it says in the Amplified, and draw near with a true and honest and sincere heart. And listen to how it says, in unqualified assurance and absolute conviction that is engendered by your faith. That is, you personally leaning on the entire human personality of God, and absolute trust and confidence. In other words, I can lean on God and be confident that God will not change. Is that making any difference to anybody? It's not that my faith is so mighty. It's the object of my faith.
Yes.
That is so
Yes.
mighty.
Yes.
We just try to get the mustard seed level stuff. But it's the object, it's the God of our faith. So on the surface, it tells us in order to experience the God, in order to experience the promises of God,